Everyone, so I'm sitting here in the nice, cool, comfy shade of my hood in front of my 2003 Dodge Ram 2500. I love how Dodge, by the way, incorporated this lovely bench into the front of the truck. So if you're broke down on the side of the road, you can just pop the hood, get some shade, and wait to be rescued. It's not that bad, but I am working on the truck today because I noticed something on my last tow up to the racetrack. A lot of times I actually use my motorhome to tow because we're staying for a weekend, so we're camping overnight. But this was a one-day race, so I took the truck. And I noticed that on my way up, and my tow out here in coastal North Carolina is very flat. Everything's flat. I'm not climbing hills. I don't have any big grades to go up. But when you're towing, you're putting more, load on the engine. And I noticed it was running a little hot. It was about 85 degrees outside. But my temperature gauge on this truck always typically locked like dead 12 o'clock, high noon. But it was climbing. Unfortunately, my gauge in this truck, they gave me a temperature gauge, which is great. I think more gauges in vehicles is important because I'm pretty sure the auto industry just wants to stupefy everyone and just like, nope, we give you no gauges. Like, why would you care about what your temperature of your engine's at? We'll just give you an idiot light, so when it's overheating, we'll have it ding at you. But by then, it's already overheating. It's stupid, right? I don't want to get off on that tangent, but I think more gauges to tell you about how your car is running is critical. You don't have to be a gearhead. It's just knowing what's going on with your engine. I think it's important. So in this case, I noticed it's getting a little hot. Although I didn't see a number, it was in a range that it typically isn't. Okay. So if I had to guess, it probably operates normally about 180 to 190 degrees. This was probably closer to 210. And what's supposed to happen is the clutch fan is supposed to engage, and that is to give you auxiliary cooling over your radiator to help cool your engine even more. But that wasn't happening. And you usually know when that kicks in because it sounds like a jet fan going off. It's very loud and noisy, and you hear it kick in. And it rapidly kind of drops your temperature down, and then it shuts off when it gets to the temperature it should be. So it's supposed to be there for extra cooling when you need it, and typically when I'm driving around to work and things like that, the truck's not getting that hot, so it's not unusual for it not to kick in. But in this instance, it should have, and that got me suspicious about the clutch fan. So that's what I'm digging into today, and I'll show you that it's relatively easy to change if you've never done one before. And if nothing, even if you don't want to do this yourself, I just thought it was important to talk about knowing what your engine and your car is doing, because the more you are connected to what your car is doing, and the more you can kind of learn just about the basics of how all the systems of your car operate, it's gonna save you maybe a lot of money just taking it into a mechanic and saying, I don't know what's wrong with it, and you don't know what you're going to get charged, and you don't know if they're fixing the right things or not, or if you're being overcharged. So that's why I like to be really hands-on with my stuff. Again, you don't have to turn into a full-blown mechanic. It doesn't require a whole lot of tools, but the knowledge, again, even if you're going to take it to a shop, just knowing ahead of time, like, this is the issue, and if they try to tell me it's some other issue, that should set off some red flags. So the basics of an engine are that it has a cooling system that pumps coolant through the engine block to keep it within a normal operating temperature so it doesn't overheat. And even if it's a newer car or it's an older vehicle, there's going to be some form of auxiliary cooling, and most new vehicles have electric fans that kick on. But in some of the older vehicles, they have these clutch fans, which are a form of allowing the fan to lock up, kind of one-to-one rotation with your engine. And then when it's not needed, it kind of disengages and lets it spin somewhat freely. So I'll show you that here in a moment. But I'll also show you why, beyond not hearing it kick on when I was driving, what also kind of pointed me or made me confident that it was the clutch fan that needed replaced. All right, this guy right here is the clutch. This is your fan. Typically when the engine's running, this is spinning with the motor, but this fan, as you can see, I can move it by hand, just kind of freewheels with the motion of the engine. It's not really locked up. It can kind of just float along and spin at its own pace. Now, what happens is this clutch unit here is filled with a oil-like material, like some kind of fluid, like a viscous fluid. And as it takes heat from the front of the water pump and heats up, there's a little sensor kind of coil under here that engages this clutch to lock up this fan, and then it will be locked, spinning 1 to 1, and draw a lot of air across the radiator and help to cool the engine. Now, one of the things that caught my eye when I came to look at this, when I lifted the hood, is you can see this kind of oiling here. It's not dry, which means, I'll get a good shot of this, fluid's been seeping out along this shaft from inside this clutch, which is why it's probably not locking up. So I'm going to take this off and put a new one on. In order to get this off, there's this very large nut. Some of these are done differently, but in this case it's one large nut on this shaft that you need to unscrew. But if you just start spinning this water pump will just kind of slip underneath this belt. So what I did to secure it, some say you can put a little more tension on your belt tensioner. Try to do it that way. That wasn't working so well for me. I just came behind these holes here in the front of the pump pulley and wedged these in here so that I could then get a screwdriver, it's going to focus, and hold tension back this way while I unscrewed it that way. So you can play around with that, find what works for you, but that was my solution to the issue, and it worked pretty well. It's on there pretty good until it kind of breaks free, and then it's really, you can see it spinning off by hand, just me turning this. Take a quick look at the fan. Make sure none of the blades appear cracked or bent out of whack. If you lose your place on this also, there's a little bit here says front, so you know which way is the front. And we'll put this on the new clutch. See here, this helps it sense the temperature, but definitely all of this gunk back in here tells me it's been leaking, and that's probably why it's not locking up properly. Here's a new one. Always good to compare to the previous. Everything looks like it's right. So there you go. Clutch fan is installed, fan's back in. It's all good. So I'll know more when I drive around, put it under a load again. I'll definitely be listening for that to kick in, but feel pretty confident that's my problem. And getting back to the money issue, that part was about 50, 60 bucks. If I had taken that to a shop and let's say they were like honest quote, like that's all it needed, we're going to do a clutch fan, then you know, they're probably going to charge me closer to $100 for that part, because you know, shops need to make something. It's no knock on mechanics. That's how they earn their living. So you know, probably a markup on the parts. So let's say 100 for the part, and then you know, they're probably going to charge an hour minimum to do that job, because it's a pretty basic job. But let's say they charge an hour minimum. Shop time's probably going to be about $100. So at a minimum, I think if you take that to a shop, and I could be wrong, you know, if you're a mechanic, comment below. I'd love to hear what you would charge for this job, but probably $200 job minimum. Take it to a shop, a mechanic to do. Take it to the dealer somewhere else where they're going to say, oh, well, you know, we should probably do your water pump too, you know, because there's all these kind of things that service centers tend to go off of, like, hey, you know, let's do that water pump. They don't know if that water pump's been done before or not, but they'll just throw that out there because, you know, it's usually what we do when we replace that. We replace the water pump at the same time, so you don't have to worry about it ever being a problem. And, you know, if you're not mechanically inclined, it's easy to fall into that being something that sounds smart. But then add in the water pump job, which is a little more extensive, and you might go from a $200 job to a $1,000 job. Again, if I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. So if you are a certified mechanic, I'm not. And you know, what would you quote for that kind of job? Certainly comment below. But, and again, no knock on mechanics. I got a lot of respect for all what they do, because I do it myself as much as I can. And again, that's how they make their living. But if you're looking to save some money, it's always a good idea to invest a little bit of knowledge, just learning the basic operation of how an engine operates, so that when a part is starting to fail, you can catch it before it completely fails. So when you know that your engine's not running quite right, and you might save yourself quite a bit of money. I know I have. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please comment below and follow the channel, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And thanks for checking out Diggers TV. Now we can get back to racing.